You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Protect your online privacy today. Use our exclusive link, expressvpn.com/missionlog, and you can get an extra 3 months for free. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog.
This episode of Mission Log is also sponsored by Helix Sleep. Take the Helix Sleep quiz and get up to $200 off your new mattress and 2 free pillows at helixsleep.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 409, sOrphan.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week we go back in time, as it were, to revisit an episode of Star Trek and then live with it for a little while. Then we'll see if we're the same afterwards, or if we're feral animals who can't shake it off, or what we've just been through.
This week, sOrphan, the one where there's a time portal and someone goes through it and then someone else has to make it right. Nope, not that one. Not that one either. This one.
Well, we'll jump through, this portal. That portal. No, this portal.
Yeah.
This portal in a moment, and we'll have trivia just as soon as I tell you how to reach us. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek, and that's why we want to hear from you. Use Mission Log Pod to give us a like and a share on Facebook and Twitter, then follow and rate us at Apple Podcasts to help others find the show. You can call us on Skype at Mission Log Pod or by dialing 323-522-5641. Send us an email at missionlog@roddenberry.com. And remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And now, with his DNA sequence finally intact from all of his research, here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
I wouldn't be so sure about that, Norman, but we'll see. Today's episode, sOrphan. We have a story by Joe Menosky, and as always, we need to talk about where the story actually comes from. Yes, Joe had an idea way back in his TNG days about a time portal making a kid disappear. The child back then was Alexander, who Joe was ready to be done with. And even though we got a future Alexander later, it wasn't Joe's script in which the adult Alexander would have carried on, and we would have had never seen child Alexander again. So it was Renee Echeverria who repitched Joe's idea to make it about Molly. The writing assignment was handled to Bradley Thompson and David Weddle, who would take care of the teleplay, but their approach was something different, a little more contemporary teen drama in which Molly had grown up with some foster parents in an agrarian society, and she liked them quite a bit and then kind of grew to resent the O'Briens. It was Ira Stephen Bear who stepped in and recommended that they make Time Portal Molly feral, and a much different problem to deal with. The episode was directed by Alan Croker, and we just talked about Alan's most recent contribution to DS9, the episode His Way. He's got 4 more to go on DS9, then long runs on both Voyager and Enterprise. As you know, I like to point out location shooting, and in this episode we have a really lovely spot in Malibu Creek State Park that's just due northwest of what most people know as Malibu Beach, and conveniently it's also really close to the Paramount Ranch, which is in the same Santa Monica Mountains where they film MASH and just a ton of other shows and movies. It is a real-life location, and just like you can get some beautiful scenery out of your film there, you also have to deal with wildlife. Everyone in the crew remembers filming the picnic scene when there was a murmur among the crew, and you do not talk while filming. After they cut, the director motioned for the actors to come over to the camera setup, and then they turned to see a rattlesnake making its way to where they were just doing their scene, and a park ranger shooing it away. Let's talk about guest stars. We get to welcome back Rosalind Chow as Keiko O'Brien. Keiko is obviously part of the family here, but keep in mind that we haven't actually seen her since the middle of season 5 in The Begotten, when Kira gave birth to the O'Brien's baby, Yoshi. And same goes for Hannah Hatai, who we welcome back as Molly O'Brien, well, as the younger Molly. We also meet...
I'm sorry.
Yeah?
I'm sorry, John, not to interrupt you, but I do. There's something important that I have to bring up with Rosalind Chow coming back.
Yeah.
In this episode, we have no opportunity to bring back the Wheel of Excuses.
Oh, it was a lost opportunity. But Norman, I feel like that wheel will be back. We just got to hold on a little bit longer. I'm sure that it will be back. Now, in this episode, we also meet the older, different version of Molly. That one is played by Michelle Krusick. So Michelle has had a very interesting life and career. She was born in Taiwan, but raised by adoptive parents in the U.S. One of her earliest roles was a bit part in the Oliver Stone film Nixon. She had met Stone while she was a student and actually fell asleep in a class in which he was the guest lecturer. TV and film roles followed with DS9 pretty early in her career. A recurring role on the sitcom Titus preceded more guest and recurring roles on shows like Hawaii Five-0, General Hospital, and Dirty Sexy Money. At present, she is just one of 8 directors in the AFI Directing Workshop for Women.
From the makers of Children of Time, it's Time's Orphan. Wow, when I put it that way, it's kind of disturbing.
Prologue. It's a peaceful morning in the O'Brien suite. Miles and Keiko are finally back together again and are enjoying a blissful morning until a very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed Molly rouses them with her excitement about today's picnic on Galana, a planet in the Bajoran system. The family gets ready to depart, but sadly, poor Chester has to stay behind. Later on the lush and green planet's surface, the O'Briens are enjoying the peace and solitude of their surroundings as Molly tells her baby brother Yoshi that the last time she saw her mommy, he was still in her belly. While Keiko is brushing Molly's hair, Miles tells Keiko that he promises that he will never send them away again, and if the Dominion War heats up, he will put in for a transfer to keep them away from the front lines. As Molly explores the planet, Miles and Keiko turn their attention to Kiriyoshi until they both hear a scream from a nearby cavern. It's Molly, and she's accidentally fallen into a deep chasm with a strange energy pool emanating from the bottom. As Miles tries to lift Molly out, she loses her grip, falls into the energy pool, and disappears. Act 1. Inside the cave, a fully detailed science and engineering team led by the Chief, Major Kira, and Dax have analyzed the technology that produced the strange energy pool where Molly fell into. Dax explains that it's an ancient temporal portal that was left behind from whatever civilization that used to occupy Galana. According to Chronoton readings, the portal may have sent Molly back in time some 300 years. With a few technical setbacks, the Chief lets the team try to restore power to the portal's doorway while he tries to calm down a very frightened Keiko and Kiriyoshi. Keiko insists on staying, but lets Kira take Yoshi to the Defiant, where he would be safer. Back on the Defiant, Kira and Yoshi rediscover one another as she admits to wanting a child of her own someday. Odo, unable to reconcile those feelings with Kira at the moment, redirects their attention to the situation at hand. The Bajoran Archaeological Institute has sent him information on Galana. It seems that Bajoran settlers only inhabited the planet less than 100 years ago, meaning that whenever Molly arrived in those 300 years in the past, she would have been all alone on Galana. Outside the cave, Miles tries to comfort a very distraught Keiko and is pleasantly interrupted by Dax, who is ready to engage the portal. As the ancient temporal device is activated, Dax locks onto Molly's DNA sequence and transports her through time, and, surprising to all, materializes in front of them. However, Molly appears not as she was when she disappeared originally. She is now some 10 years older, feral in appearance and in behavior as she bites her own father and tries to escape, but not before Dr. Bashir sedates her with a hypospray as her parents look on in shock. Act 2. In the Defiant sickbay, Dr. Bashir confirms that the feral teenage girl from the planet's surface is in fact Molly, based on his DNA scan comparisons, even though she is now 10 years older. Miles wants to try the temporal experiment again to try and retrieve their younger Molly, but Keiko impassionately states that this is their Molly, and they don't have the right to take away the 10 years that she's experienced. Julian cautions them to tread lightly with Molly, as any emotional trauma could be damaging to her reassimilation adjustment period. As are all in agreement, a cargo bay on Deep Space Nine will be converted into a safe space for Molly and her parents to help them adjust to the unknowns of their new lives together. Back on Deep Space Nine, Worf finds Dax in their quarters, spending time with baby Kirayoshi. She is watching him while the O'Briens help Molly adjust to her new surroundings in the cargo bay. He knows that Jadzia is supposed to monitor a comet that is passing through the Denoris belt, which is an opportunity she's been waiting eagerly for weeks. So Worf fathers up and promises to watch Yoshi while Dax attends to her duties, reminding her all the while that he too was once a father, as she reminds him that she too was once a parent of 9 children and knows how bumpy the road will be for Worf, regardless of his good intentions. But Worf, as is wont to do, is determined to prove his paternal quality. Meanwhile, in the cargo bay, Molly wakes from her sedation and finds herself in a somewhat familiar surrounding, as it has been set up to remind her of Galana. When the O'Briens arrive, she immediately climbs a tree to create a safe distance from them, but they came prepared, with fruit to share, and most importantly, Keiko brought Loopy, Molly's favorite doll. It hopes that it would spark some memory of Molly's past. And it does, as she descends from the tree, grabs the doll from Keiko, and stares at it deeply. Act 3. Miles and Keiko continue trying to rehabilitate Molly, trying to engage her with very basic language skills and games. Using various colored balls and passing them back and forth to try and see if Molly would react to them, Molly hoards the balls protectively until on his very last attempt for her to throw one back to him, Miles intently asks please, a word that connects with Molly as she rolls the ball back to her father. Smiles abound as the family realizes that their first true connection has been made. Back in Worf's makeshift nursery, meaning his quarters, he's confounded as to why, despite all of his efforts checking off every tick box of proper fathering that he could think of, and all that Dax could think of, feeding, diaper changing, and singing until his throat was raw, why wasn't Yoshi falling asleep? He admits to an exhausted Jadzia who is lying in bed that he knows how important being a good father would be to their future children. Determined to succeed, Worf musters himself up to get back to work. Meanwhile, in the cargo bay, Molly is asleep in the tree, and Miles is trying to rest up on a nearby couch as Keiko arrives to spell him for a while so he can go back to work. However, when Molly observes Keiko brushing her hair, she cautiously approaches her mother, sits next to her, and nudges Keiko to do the same to her, as if Molly remembers her mother doing so when she was a child. Catching up with Julian while walking down a corridor, Miles shows him a picture that Molly drew of their family. Julian cautions him not to push Molly too hard, too soon, but the chief assures Julian that Molly is doing just fine. As they arrive back in the chief's quarters, they find Worf with a baby rattle in hand and sitting with Yoshi, teaching him gung gung gung, a Klingon lesson taught to babies to train them to become future warriors, to which he tells the chief how baby Yoshi acquitted himself well in these lessons. Ah, Worf. Parroting done right? While Miles returns to the cargo bay, he finds Keiko in a panic watching Molly ferally pace back and forth and in obvious distress. As soon as Keiko says that she has to leave to pick up Yoshi and take him home, Molly stops and repeats the word home in a way that the O'Briens realize that they have to escort Molly to their quarters, her home, before she was lost in the portal. However, shortly after they show Molly her former room, she becomes agitated and aggressive again, until she picks up and stares at a picture of all of them on the grassy field of Galana, looking intently at her parents and saying, Molly, home. Later in Quark's holosuite, the O'Briens are back on Galana, at least the best holographic simulation of the planet. Molly is deliriously happy, running around the fields and doing cartwheels just as she did 10 years ago before she disappeared. However, as history has proven time and again, there's always trouble in paradise, as Quark interrupts the O'Brien simulation, telling the chief that he has to leave, because a pair of Klingon customers have arrived for their holosuite reservation and want it now. Frustrated with it all, the chief ends the program, and as the lush green fields, trees, sunlight, and fresh air all abruptly disappear right in front of Molly's eyes, she's flooded with terror, flees the holosuite, and fights her way out of Quark's, trying to escape the horrors of her surrounding, even attacking a Markalian customer with a broken bottle. And before she can do any more harm to herself or anyone else, Odo orders his deputy to stun Molly as she falls to the ground as her parents watch helplessly. Act 4. In Captain Sisko's office, Benjamin tells the chief that the Markalian is pressing charges against Molly and that she will be placed in a Federation Special Care Center on Davos Prime for further evaluation. O'Brien pleads with his captain that this is a mistake, that she'll only recover properly with the help of her parents, but Sisko regretfully says that it's out of his hands. Meanwhile, in the brig, Molly is pacing back and forth in her holding cell and even begins throwing herself against the force field, trying to escape. Dr. Bashir says that her adrenaline level is so high that she could go into shock. Ordering the force field to be taken down, Miles tries to reason with Molly as she launches herself at him, forcing Julian to sedate her with a hyperspray yet again. He tells Miles and Keiko that he can't keep sedating her forever and that they have to try another way. Quark's holosuite can do for now, but sooner or later she will be put on that transport to Davos Prime. Back in Worf's quarters, Dax finds him sitting down and looking despondent as Julian emerges from the back room and tells them both that Yoshi will be fine. It's just a bump on the heads. Kids, am I right? Worf admits that he was roughhousing with Yoshi a bit too much, and in the midst of their playing, Yoshi ran into a table and hurt himself. Worf, again as he is wont to do, blames himself to the nth degree and considers his paternal skills a failure. Not only to Yoshi, but to Dax and their future children, and most significantly admitting that he was a failure in raising Alexander. In the O'Brien's quarters, Miles is deep in thought, and Keiko, knowing Miles for as long as she has, also knows he's plotting something and forces him to confess, as Molly is her daughter too. Miles wants to steal a runabout, take Molly back to Galana, and let her go. Let her go home. Back through the portal and back to a world where she felt safe and happy for the last 10 years. He can't see any other way around their situation, and Keiko, wanting only happiness for Molly, agrees. After subduing the deputy guarding Molly's holding cell, the chief grabs Molly and makes haste to make Keiko at the airlock where they are packed and ready to go. Suddenly, a security guard intercepts them and calls for Odo. Act 5. As Odo arrives on the scene, he orders his deputy to check on Pinar, the guard who Miles sedated, seeing if he wants to press charges against the chief. Once the deputy is gone, Miles pleads desperately at Odo to let them go. However, Odo folds his arms defiantly and tells Miles how disappointed he is in him. Disappointed that someone as capable as the chief would be at a prison break would so easily be apprehended. And just as the chief is ready to resign himself into Odo's custody, the constable opens the airlock and orders them to be on their way. Making it safely to the surface of Galana and back in the cavern, Keiko makes sure that Molly has everything she needs to survive her trip back through the portal. A knife, a blanket, and most importantly, Loopy, while the chief powers up the temporal portal. Fighting through the agony of letting their daughter go, the chief and Keiko embrace Molly one last time as she looks back at them saying, "Molly loves you." As she disappears through the energy doorway, the chief grabs his phaser to destroy it so that no one would be able to find her ever again, especially Federation authorities. However, once the older Molly appears on the other side, she discovers a huddled young girl crying in the shadows. It's young Molly. She is alive and exactly the same age as when she first disappeared. Elder Molly points towards the portal, telling her younger self that Mommy and Daddy are there. She hands her younger self Loopy and nudges her towards the portal doorway. And once younger Molly walks through, the elder version of herself disappears. The chief, about to fire on the portal structure, is awestruck as little Molly appears and he and Keiko are overwhelmed with joy and relief that their Molly has returned. Back in Worf's quarters, Dax, who just dropped off Yoshi at the O'Briens to unite with his not-so-older sister, finds a still somewhat despondent Worf beating himself up about what happened to Yoshi. The O'Briens invited the two of them to dinner as thanks for taking care of Yoshi during this whole incident. But Dax made their excuses, knowing that Worf would be reluctant to go in the current state that he's in. However, just as they put all that aside, Dax asks Worf what gung 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 means, because Yoshi kept saying that and playing with his rattle all the while she was taking care of him. Dax assuages Worf's doubts about parenthood, and they both agree on canceling their previous plans in the holosuite to have dinner with the newly reunited O'Brien family. Later, in the O'Brien's quarters, as Molly is drawing a picture of their family, the chief informs Keiko that the original temporal calibration fluctuated just enough for both Mollys to have existed simultaneously. As the younger one returned, the elder one ceased to be. Keiko wonders if the older version realized that she was saving the younger version of herself. Molly finished with her drawing and shows Mommy and Daddy what her idea of family looked like. It looked much in the same style that her older self made for Miles earlier, the one that came from the mind of his daughter, aged 10 years older. The end.
Nice job, Norman. There's a lot of plot going on there with our story of little Molly, bigger Molly, and how to get that whole thing reconciled. But right out of the gate, just right at the start, there's some stuff that I need to address. I'm really glad that sunscreen is still a thing in the 24th century. We're still concerned about those damaging rays from the sun. I mean, look, as somebody who needs it deeply all the time, I would hope that in the 24th century we just have a hypo that will protect you, but whatever, can't have everything. If we can make it the 24th century, we still need sunscreen. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I will also say, Chester, I'm so glad to see him back. We introduced an idea episodes ago, and then we get to see that element play out again. So there he is.
Well, I was glad to see him back. You were glad to see him back. Why so much hate from Keiko?
Okay, I have a little. I've got a comment that I'll save for the next segment. Yes,
I was bummed.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
Chester deserves fresh air.
Yeah,
right?
Come on, he's a cat. Yeah.
So if he fell into the portal, then he came back 10 years older. He would have been like mellow Chester,
right?
And then Keiko would have been okay with that.
Exactly.
So the line, I was dying. Right when this happened, it's the very beginning of the episode. Keiko says when they were in bed, she pats him on the stomach. What have you been eating since we've been gone? And the chief says, the usual. Yeah. And I can't help but say this. What, like the usual meaning fun and freedom?
Yes. That is 100% accurate. No lies detected.
I like that they put that icon, that bracelet on Molly, so that because. I mean, how many other Asian daughters are Deep Space Nine where you would obviously mistake her for the 10-year-old version of her?
Right, totally.
Without the bracelet.
Yeah. That was important. I'm glad that we had that.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's a nice attention to detail there. Okay, another, I think, a very significant quote. It comes off kind of passing, but it's very significant. So Keiko says, what if the war heats up again at the station and it isn't safe anymore? And then O'Brien says, I'll put in for a transfer. I never want us to be apart again. Oh, there's a war going on, right?
I know.
Right. Okay. So Cisco goes off to check out some ruins, destroys the 30,000-year-old tablet.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's going on during the war. The chief also just says, you know what? If it just heats up again, I'll just transfer. Dude, you are like the chief engineer of the station that is at the front line of the war. You can't do that unless he actually... Okay, so here's the big question. Unless he actually doesn't even really care about his job.
Yeah, right. Which it seems that he does. But look, he's been away from them for over a year. And now he decides, I don't want to be a part again. So much so that I will transfer my job. First of all, you're needed. Second of all, I don't believe you. So, Miles, I will hold you to that. I will hold you to that promise, okay? When the war heats up, I want to see you ask for a transfer. I'll be waiting. In that picnic scene, by the way, I love watching, because, it's the old adage, never work with animals or kids, and you got them both in this episode. I love Yoshi just munching on grass, and nobody cares. It's like, here, kid, this will keep you occupied while we film you for however many hours of the day. He's just pulling grass out of the garage, chewing on it. Nobody cares. That's a great little real-life moment.
It's lucky you didn't yank that rattlesnake's tail.
I know,
that could have been a whole different thing.
Very different, yeah.
So I like good set design. I like how they bring in the architecture of this temporal portal. Mm-hmm. What I didn't like about that scene, one, the chief actually used his bad shoulder to hoist that portal, put your back into it, lad. Backs into it, lad, and he kind of helps try and support that. But also, did anyone take a temporal reading of how old the structure was? Because I'm thinking that it's old, and I'm thinking that maybe you don't want to manhandle old technology like that, because it might just fall apart in your hands.
Yeah, could actually make it worse. And it does make you wonder, though, how many time portals are just laying around on different planets and how old they are. I mean, look, you got the Iconians, you got the Guardian of Forever, you got this one. They're just, the universe, or at least our galaxy, is just lousy with godlike aliens and time portals everywhere.
Right?
Everywhere. Yeah. Very irresponsible. They need to put out some caution tape in front of that stuff. By the way, there's a piece of equipment that they use when they're getting ready to try to beam Molly back through the portal in the first act. Looks like the control center from the TARDIS. And
very similar.
I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but brilliant. Brilliant. It's got to be on purpose. I mean, come on.
For our Doctor Who fans out there,
yeah,
let us know.
Yeah.
Do the email thing, do the Twitter thing, do the Facebook thing. I thought that the look that Renee gave Kira as Odo when she said she wanted children of her own someday, I thought that was just brilliant. Oh. Just very subtle, but because he just looked like, I can't do that for you.
Yeah. Well, he could go scoop one out of the lake. That, I
mean, he could.
Yeah. So...
But it's it loses a little bit that romantic ambiance of the moment.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And remember, folks, if ever you beam back your daughter that was lost for 10 years from a portal and she materializes, frayed clothing, ragged hair equals feral. So approach cautiously.
Good point. They need to put that in Starfleet 101. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to forewarn everyone here for this next piece because it should come with a warning. This scene should come with a warning. Mm-hmm. So Dax says in her quarters when she and Worf are talking about Yoshi, she says, Worf, that's very sweet, but let's face it, you're not very good with babies. And then Worf says, I raised Alexander. Okay, the amount of eye roll whiplash that you'll get from that moment would cause you vertigo. So, again, just a fair warning. We watch these episodes so you don't have to.
You did not, Worf, okay? That's just, those are the three-word answer to your claim there. I'm sorry, your claim does not hold up to scrutiny. We're done. Good day, sir.
I am a good parent. No. I don't care what you say. I like how Feral Molly kind of hoarded all those balls when they were throwing those balls at her. Yeah. I mean, they could have been food, they could have been fruit, but it's something that was very natural, I think, to someone who, was alone for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Just like, it's mine. I'm going to put it in this little pocket in my cave and protect it, like she did with Loopy. Like she used the balls to actually cover her doll, which was there was a nice little detail because this is mine. This is my hoard. This is my treasure trove. No one's taken it away from me.
I think of all the things in this episode that we may find places to criticize. I think she is excellent, and there's a lot of details in the performance, and it's little things like that clearly they're making a point of that you see that she's doing, but her movements, her vocalizations, and there's a kind of realism to her reactions, which I thought was really well done. And while we're talking about that scene, hey, that Galana melon, I wanted to look that up. That is Kiwano, and that is the also known as the African horned cucumber. And it is pretty cool looking. It is perfect for Star Trek, apparently. I've never had one, or at least if I have, I can't remember it. That internal seed consistency, kind of gel-like, kind of like a cucumber, kind of like a zucchini, but also a little sweet, a little kiwi-ish. And apparently the longer it ripens, it takes on a little bit of a banana flavor as well. So,
Interesting.
yeah. So now I'm curious to go try it.
Kawano melon. I like that. I thought it looked like kind of like, it wasn't big enough to be it wasn't small enough to be a pomegranate, but it kind of reminded me with a seed density in the center.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of seed density.
Oh, hey.
Watch out.
King of transitions right there, yeah.
So Worf talking to Dax about her judging his quality as a parent, his fortitude, his fertileness. He said that you are judging me on my fitness as a parent. Don't deny it, Jadzia. I can see it in your eyes. I have proven myself to be a worthy husband to you, but you're not convinced I would be a good parent to your children. Dude,
Yeah.
take it from well, don't take it from me because I'm no good at this either, but take it from Barry White. Put on one of his albums.
Yeah.
Pour some Klingon blood wine. Dude, your outcome of that evening would be so much better.
Yeah. Ooh.
Right?
Worf. Come on, bro. Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of gungs.
Yeah.
Gung, gung, gung. I wonder if Klingons have a Baby's First Batlith picture album.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be adorable.
That would be.
Right?
That would. So the thing that didn't ring true to me about that scene, though, is that it seems like Worf would actually be totally cool with a toddler bumping his head during rough play. He probably did that 100 times with Alexander. He'd be like, "Get up and walk it off. Crying is without honor." Like, it would be done. That would be it. That was problem solved right there.
John, we could put this whole Klingon ridges, argument to bed. Was it this? Was it that? It was literally letting their children like run around sharp things.
Yeah, right.
And just bumping their heads into everything and just scarring their foreheads up, and that's how they got their ridges.
Right. I think that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
There's that scene where Sisko says that he has to send Molly to like this Federation special center. And he says that, "I'm sorry, Chief, I wish there was another way." You realize that this is the guy. I'm going to get the emails about this, but I don't care.
Yeah, whatever.
This is the guy that maneuvered the Romulans into a war. He coerced people. He bribed people. He was an accessory to crimes. He admitted all of this. But there's no way that he can actually call somebody and say, "Can you do me a favor and not put her in jail?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Odo found a way. He just hit a control panel and says, "Get out of here with your kid because I care about you, Chief."
Yeah.
No wonder he wants to get another job.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Chief. That might mean that we break a rule if we did that. So far be it for me to break a rule. Yeah. Come
Profits
on.
forbid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I get a little tense about that because it's true. That whole scene was just like, come on, really?
Yeah.
You're not going to bend the rules for the chief who needs your help, clearly?
Exactly.
But Odo did, and he just pushed an airlock button, let him go. He doesn't care about the ramifications. This is his friend.
And you know what? Here's where I like, because it is definitely an arguable point about the acceleration of Odo and Kira's relationship. I totally get that. I mean, it plays well for some people, it doesn't for others. But whatever, we're here. What's nice is the payoff in this softening of Odo. And him actually valuing these friendships more. So I appreciated that scene now more than I would have, however many episodes or months before, where it may have come across as a little forced, a little stilted. In this, I was like, yeah, that's Odo now. He would do that.
That was my favorite scene this episode. I was literally like fist pumping the air.
Yes.
And then I kind of, I collected myself and then got back to the critical thinking of this, and I can't reconcile how he's going to get all the paperwork squared away.
Right. Well, hey, if he learns anything from Captain Sisko, it's that you can just create another lie to cover for the lie.
Yeah, lead by example.
Yep.
When feral Molly sees younger Molly and holds her hand and pushes her through the doorway, so my Time Cop, the movie Time Cop, radar went way off because there's this whole thing in certain temporal field belief systems in science fiction where the same matter can't occupy the same space. That's Time Cop.
Right.
But then this is all kind of timey-wimey stuff anyway, so I don't care. I give it a pass. But it did go. I was like, you can't do that. You can't touch her or else we'll turn into this gelatinous thing.
Yes. Well, if we learn anything from JCVD, it's that. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But then again, this is the series where you just ask an orb for help and it will change time and everything is good.
Oh, right. Oh, see, that's how you clean it all up. You just you go into the wormhole, just like, hey, come on, guys, let's fix this one, okay? You did wipe out a Dominion invasion fleet. let's just fix this for the chief, okay? Because the chief is going to need some fixing here, because I have to wonder. Now, look, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that Keiko doesn't have to face any of this, but the chief, what is his experience when he gets back to the station? Chief, let me introduce you. Here's the guy that your daughter stabbed, so now you get to deal with him. Chief, here's the security guard that you knocked out. So you guys get to know each other. Hey, and Chief, also remember, here's Captain Sisko to talk to you about that runabout that you stole. I don't have a good feeling about that hearing, but, maybe I'll be surprised.
I'm actually glad you brought up this as kind of like a checklist of things that happened to the Chief, because it will come back significantly in my wrap-up.
Okay, good.
I really, really like the drawing at the end. The one that Julian said, don't push Molly too hard, and you got to see the Chief and Keiko and Yoshi like as trees and suns and clouds and things like that. It was a really nice touch, because Molly, when she returned to a little girl state, she kind of drew that similar tree.
Yeah.
But here's another one of my issues with the episode. It's kind of like, now this is the Back to the Future part that I have a problem with. If feral Molly didn't exist, allowing younger Molly to exist, anything that feral Molly did would be eliminated from the timeline. Like stabbing the person in Quarks.
Right.
Like drawing the picture that the Chief probably has up in his room somewhere.
Right.
Because that older Molly ceased to be as that temporal portal corrected the timeline, returning Molly back to her original state. So is it Back to the Future, or is it Time Cop? Is it Doctor Who? What are we dealing with here temporally?
I have no idea. It's all of the above and none of the above. That's the only answer we can settle on.
Who looked after Chester while everyone was gone? Did Worf remember to tell him he's a nice cat and a pretty cat?
We'll get right back to Time's Orphan after a word from this week's sponsors. Hey, it can't be stressed enough how important internet privacy is. It's important to me and Norman. It's important, presumably, to all of you. So think about it this way. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like taking a call on a train or a bus on speaker for everyone to hear.
Oh, we love that, right?
Right. Well, yeah. See, I don't want to be that person. I don't think you want to be that person. I don't think anybody within the sound of my voice wants to be that person. But there it is, all of your personal detail, the contents of that conversation there being shared to everybody. But using the internet without ExpressVPN is exactly like that. So why in the world does everyone need a VPN? Well, it's exactly for reasons like that. Your ISP, internet service provider, so whatever it is that you use, Comcast, Verizon, Spectrum, whatever, they know every single website that you visit. All of them. Let me stress that. All of them. And ISPs can then turn around and sell that information to ad companies and tech giants and anybody else who wants it, who then can use that data to target you. That hardly sounds fair, does it?
I mean, you're absolutely right, John. I mean, it's no coincidence that as you continue to go through this journey of using the internet and looking at different websites, there's a correlation with your activity and the amount of ads, especially target-specific ads that are flooding your emails or flooding the social media destinations that you choose to visit. That's what these things do. That's what these data mining programs and bots do. So why wouldn't you want to protect yourself with a program that allows you to be safe and secure and allows you to navigate the internet at ease? That's what ExpressVPN does. It creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so people can't peep on your online activity. No one wants to get peeped on, especially when you know that you're not being peeped
Yeah,
on.
I certainly don't want that. No peeping, please.
Yes, it's a peep-free zone. So The best thing about this is that once you install ExpressVPN, either on your home computer or any of your mobile devices, you just fire up their app and click one button, and that's it. It connects automatically. It shows you and tells you that you are protected and in the very best server for that protection closest to your zip code, which just means it's regional and you're protected with the fastest ping possible. So it's rated number 1 by CNET, Wired, and The Verge. It works on phones, laptops, even your routers. So everyone who shares your Wi-Fi can also be protected too. And that's the great thing about
Absolutely. So the things that we love about ExpressVPN, first and foremost, it is easy to use and it protects our information. And those two hand in hand couldn't be better for us or for you. So listen, secure your online activity by visiting expressvpn.com/missionlog today. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog, and you can get an extra 3 months for free. expressvpn.com/missionlog. Hey, Norman, I've mentioned it before on the show and to you in passing. And, well, anybody who will listen to me, sometimes I work in bed. Very often I sleep in bed. I also, I watch stuff in bed. I read stuff in bed. Let's face it, we all, and myself included in that, we spend an awful lot of time in bed. And maybe the relaxation you need isn't as good as it could be because you're on a busted old mattress. The kind where it's got the sagging spot in the middle or the springs are poking out. You know that one. I know that one. We all know that one. Well, Helix Sleep is here to make all that go away and make it better. I've talked about my experience on a Helix Sleep mattress, and now Norman has one too.
I did exactly what we discussed in these ads. I did exactly what we've described to all of our customers to do when they're looking for a new mattress. So Carol and I, we were sleeping on a mattress that what's the easiest way to put it? Sucked. Just sucked.
That's an industry term. Yeah.
Exactly. It was ruining our sleep patterns. We were waking up achy. We were waking up cranky. It was just not a good experience. And I took the sleep quiz, and she actually took the sleep quiz as well. And we went to helixsleep.com/missionlog because I want to support our ads, as all of our customers support our ads. And we did the 2-minute sleep quiz, and it definitely did match the mattress to our body type and sleep style and sleep preferences because it asks you a myriad of questions. So everyone knows that your mattress will be designed in a unique way to you. And Helix knows that too, thanks to the sleep quiz. They have different mattresses and different firmnesses and models to choose from. They have soft and medium and firm. And here's the best thing. Their mattresses are very cool to sleep on. Like cool as in the aesthetic sense and cool at literally in the temperature sense. Because those mattresses can absorb a lot of body heat, which makes it really uncomfortable to sleep on. But the Helix mattresses are great at dissipating heat. So I was matched with the Dusk.
Ooh.
The Dusk mattress.
Yeah.
Because, see, Carol sleeps on her side. I sleep on my stomach. So the aggregate of those two was the Dusk mattress. We got it in a queen-size bed. Here's the coolest thing. It arrived on time. It arrived in this rather tall, cylindrical kind of box. And inside it was vacuum sealed and very well protected, wrapped in like a billion layers of cellophane. And as soon as I all unwrapped that, I cracked the vacuum sealing, and it's the most satisfying experience ever.
It's like you got a mattress, but you got a show along with it. It's so nice.
Took that off, let the mattress just rise and take shape and fill the room and cure. Yeah. Amazing experience, amazing shipping, amazingly easy to install.
So if you are looking for a mattress, you heard what to do. You take the quiz, you order the mattress that you're matched to. You do that all over at helixsleep.com/missionlog, and the mattress comes right to your door, shipped for free. You don't have to go to the mattress store again. Look at what we just saved you, that pain and drudgery. Helix is awesome, but you don't need to take our word for it. Helix, although you just did, Helix was awarded the #1 best overall mattress pick of 2020 by GQ and Wired magazines. Go to helixsleep.com/missionlog, take that 2-minute sleep quiz, and they'll match you to a customized mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life. They have a 10-year warranty, and you get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free. They'll even pick it up for you if you don't love it, but you will.
And even better, Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattresses, orders, and 2 free pillows, which are super comfortable also, by the way, for our listeners at helixsleep.com/missionlog.
All right, Norman, take it away. I think we're gonna find a few things maybe to take aim at here in our discussion of Time's Orphan. Might be a little critical. Might find some things here to celebrate with some praise. But I want to know what you got first.
Well, I think the first thing that kind of made me kind of sit up and say, that those questions that scratch your brain and say, like, why did they choose Molly instead of, say, Kiriyoshi? Because, Molly's 8 years old, right? And she's a little bit more, like, mentally and educationally more well-formed, has a little bit more connection with her parents. I think that in 10 years she would have remembered her parents a little bit more.
I think so, too.
But Kiriyoshi's a baby, right? So if there was a way that, say, Keiko accidentally, dropped Kiriyoshi, or he was curious and crawled over the lip of the cave and fell into the pool while she was looking for spores or funguses, stuff that she does, I still feel that would have been something a little bit more believable when, say, 10 years later, this younger version of himself, and then stealing the original pitch, who was raised by kind of like these agriculturalists, would have been robbed of a family that he was raised by. Yeah. In order to be raised by these strangers.
I think that would have been much more interesting, is you have somebody with some maturity who really, truly had a different life. Because when you go this route of, like, it was uninhabited and they had to fend for themselves, fight for themselves, well, that might have been a little harder to believe with Kiriyoshi. But if you had some people there who then ingratiated him to another life, like, we played out a similar plot like that on TNG to great effect. We even started to play that out, remember, in DS9 when Odo tries to take care of a young Jem'Hadar. And and those I thought were deeper, a little more thoughtful episodes. That 10-year gap from an 8-year-old, I wondered if that 10 years was really enough to make an 8-year-old lose their language capacity. Because Molly's a bright kid. Molly has a lot to say. So I was a little surprised at that choice. There were a lot of ways they could have gone with this episode, but that was the first choice they had to make.
Well, I think that we're trying to reconcile with the big ask here, right? The big trope of, it's kind of like, if everyone's familiar with the Tarzan origin story, or, say, Dance with Wolves, or any of those tropes where a child is taken from their parents and then raised by something else, either their own experiences, as in this case with Molly, or by apes, or by Indians, right? Apes being Greystoke, Indians being Dances with Wolves, the female character in Dances with Wolves. They're all taken at a certain age where it basically whoever is raising them will inform them of who they are, what society they belong to, what cultures that they follow. But that's when they're babies. Yeah. Right? That makes a huge difference. So I don't really buy into the fact that, like, someone who wants to be an exobiologist who can actually say the word exobiology is going to lose all of that, like you said. But that's, again, that's just a contrivance in this story that we kind of have to accept. Yeah. I really do like the original pitch of the story, where it wasn't this feral child that they had to deal with. I really disagree with Ira's his choice on changing the original pitch.
Me too. My impression of his objection to that original script is that it played a little too much like a teen family drama. And that might have been the problem with that script, but I don't think that that's the reason to completely throw that out. I think you can rewrite it in a way to, well, you could either choose to focus on Kiriyoshi, or you could choose to just write better dialogue if you're going that way with Molly and you are doing the sort of teenage angst thing. But this was an interesting and odd choice. I want to bring it back to a slightly different take on this, which is, so regardless whether it was Molly or Kiriyoshi, whether they're feral or raised by, a presumably, benign or loving family on the other side, are we really to mine some sort of ethical dilemma out of the situation in this story? Because they dramatically play it that way. They dramatically are sort of forcing that idea on you, the audience, on us, the audience. And I found myself just sort of thinking that this feels like it's something that is shoehorned into the episode to make it feel like there is a greater ethical problem or question here. There was and maybe there was a little more concern about that when we were dealing with a whole civilization as we were in Children of Time, which is an interesting episode, very good. I liked it quite a lot. But this time around, I wasn't feeling that. Mainly because, maybe it's a combination of reasons. It's Miles and Keiko's daughter. So this really isn't a decision for other people to weigh in on. This is one family, one child. It was an accident that got them into this situation already. And I'm not sure if you could argue that feral Molly's life was demonstrably better than Molly living with Keiko and Miles. So, in the greater scheme of things, you could ask, well, what if this is the life that Molly is supposed to have and supposed to is doing a lot of work there? But even then, we try to correct the mistakes or accidents in our lives and our families' lives whenever we can anyway. So I'm not really sold on the drama around whether or not this was a huge problem. What did you think? Because particularly those scenes with the doctor, it's like, well, if you take her away from here and send her back through the portal, that Molly never exists. Okay. I hate to sound cavalier about it, but fine.
No, but I think the reason why you do and the reason why I do, and I think that a reason why a majority of the people that watch this episode will or have felt about it in the same way is because they haven't developed the O'Brien's family in such a way that they've developed other relationships in the show.
Bingo.
Like you said,
bingo.
We have not seen Rosalind Chow on the series since season 5, which means that we haven't seen Molly on the series since season 5.
Yeah.
Which means that we haven't seen Kiriyoshi on the series since season 5. How are we supposed to care about characters when they're so sparsely used? And why would we care about what happens to them when we have no attachment to them as characters? Deep Space Nine, I've said this ever since that I started working for Mission Log. I said that it has probably the best, deepest bench of secondary characters in any Star Trek series that I have seen so far. And that is absolutely 100% true. I will stand by that, with the exception of a very important character's family. Yeah. That's the O'Briens, right? So they don't develop the O'Briens, which means that we don't care about them. We don't have the emotional investment that we have with, say, Jake and Benjamin, or even Quark, Rom, and Nog.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because they've had more episodes to let us develop that connection with those characters' families, and gives us agency in our emotional attachments to them. So how are we supposed to make an emotional connection with Molly, younger Molly or feral Molly, since we really don't care about her?
Yeah. Norman, is that I'm sorry, right behind you, is that a soapbox over there? Could you slide that over here? Could you slide that over here to me real quick? If you could just share that. If you could just slide that soapbox over here, I'm gonna. Okay, there we go.
Let me just put my name on it.
Yeah.
Where's my
okay?
Where's my brother tape machine?
Okay, there we go. All right. So Thank you. All right. Okay. So I'm just going to borrow that from you here for a moment and just say yes. We have to tie. This is the 800-pound gorilla, the elephant in the room. The problem with all of this is we have to talk about the writing for Keiko. And this is what drives me insane. And it goes to the very top of the episode. The very top is her ribbing Miles because he's gotten fatter over time. And wait a minute, let me add it up, in the year and a half since she's seen him. And for some reason, as you pointed out, she has disdain over Chester because why? Because a cat once killed one of her bonsai trees? I mean, this is literally like his only friend other than Dr. Bashir, who he can't hang out with all the time because they both have to work. Like, this is the thing that keeps him occupied since you've been away for a year and a half. And you're going to talk smack about the cat? I'm sorry. But this is the problem with Miles and Keiko overall. And before we get maybe some emails or comments that misunderstand why I think this is, it's not that I don't care for relationships on Star Trek. I think they have the potential to be very well done. You just said it, that we have, particularly in that secondary character lineup on DS9, some fantastic work. I would even say that Beverly Crusher and Wesley Crusher, that is a more functional, better written family relationship, even though we don't get a lot out of that in retrospect. And it's not, it's not because I just patently dislike Miles and Keiko. There's potential there. The problem is that it's a joke at this point because the writers have no idea how to write for these two. And you can tell because their first solution is just to get rid of her for long stretches of time, inappropriately long stretches of time. So apparently they don't have to think too hard about her in the writer's room. That's the only thing that I can piece together from that. And then their next solution is to fall back on every terrible cliche they can find. It's lazy writing, and nobody looks good with it. I mean, literally, we are 90 seconds into the episode, and it's Keiko taking a shot at Miles and complaining about Chester, and that is infuriating to me because you don't see, like, they're trying to do this writer's shorthand. Look how close they are. They're bickering about things. No, it comes across as shallow and petty, and it makes me not care about their relationship. I just... I want my Star Trek to aim higher. Give us adults who act like adults, not like a sitcom that you saw 20 years ago. They accomplish that in so many other ways. You just called them out on the places they accomplished that. But look, at this point, Miles had a better, deeper, more believable relationship with Liam Bilby. And we got that in one episode.
No, that's true. Let's put it on the scales here. What relationship are you a little bit more invested in? Gul Dukat and Zial? Or Miles and Keiko? Gul Dukat and Zial 100%. By far. Because why? Yeah. Because they spend time developing those characters. They spend time allowing us access to the emotional content of their motivations. That's what writing does. That's what really good writing does. And in the end, if you don't care about your main characters, then I don't care how good The Visitor is written. If you don't care about Jake, and if you don't care about Sisko in that episode, or prior to that, you won't care about that episode. That episode would just fall flat on the page.
Yeah.
It's because of the relationship prior to that. So if they wrote Keiko and Miles and this episode in this way, even though that we have problem with the time travel and things of that nature, if they wrote their relationship to the point where we would be devastated at the end of them having to make that choice, this could have been Miles and Keiko's version of The Visitor.
Yes,
right?
Yes, I had that exact same thing in mind, 100%. This was the missed opportunity to give them their version of The Visitor.
But let's get to something far more significant in this episode. Let's talk about Worf as a father.
Oh,
or a father to be, or a father in training or retraining.
Okay.
I actually really loved this B plot more than the A plot.
Yeah,
I really did.
Yeah,
I really did because Worf is. I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm not a parent. I'll get to that later. But I do believe that, especially when I see it in grandparents love their grandchildren probably more than their original children than their children.
Right.
Sometimes, because I always feel that grandparents are overcompensating for the mistakes that they made with their own children. I think Worf here is beating himself up so much about what happened to Yoshi because of all the mistakes that he made with Alexander. He's trying to turn his whole personality into something better. Like, he feels responsible for an accident that happens to a myriad of children. Like Dr. Bashir said, like, this happens to kids all the time. They run into furniture, they get hurt. We have 24th century medicine. We can heal anything. Don't worry about it. But Worf takes that personally. He's like, no, I failed him. And I want to bring a personal story to this. Everyone knows here that has been listening to the show for a while that I have 2 rabbits. I accidentally let one of my rabbits, my first rabbit, Pippin, I let her out of her cage. She escaped out of her cage, and then I heard this scream from a different room when I was cooking dinner. I came back. She was very, very injured from the second rabbit, because that's what rabbits do. I went into shock. Like, I didn't know what to do. I mean, her face was severely injured. I found the hospital. I drove down the 22, and you know how the 22 can be in Southern California. I drove down the 22 at like 110 miles an hour. You can't arrest me now. It's been a long time. But I called Carol, and I was devastated. I said, I failed her. I failed my baby girl. I failed. This is a rabbit.
Yeah, right.
This is a pet.
But the emotion is genuine.
But the emotion is there. Yeah, and because she was injured, I felt like I abjectly, 100% and totally failed her.
Yeah.
From being harmed. Yeah. From harm. And I saw that in Worf. I'm like, Worf feels that way because he wants to be better. He wants to be a better father than he was to Alexander. He wants whatever child that they are going to have together, he and Dax, to have a better quality of life that he didn't provide to his son.
Yeah.
And I found that incredibly endearing. Now, it was clunky as a story narrative, but I think it was right in the intention.
Well, yeah, and that's honestly where I come to this episode, and I feel like I want to cut it a lot of slack, because there was an interesting theme here, and that is at least the idea of looking at parents who carry some guilt and are trying to work through that because of decisions they've made that might have affected their child. They weren't there at the right time. They didn't do the right thing. How do they try to make amends for that and correct their own behavior going forward? Now, maybe unlike you, I'm not going to cut Worf as much slack because I feel like what he did to Alexander is nigh unforgivable. But I, even as I had that thought pop into my head, the Alexander we ended up with in his last and final appearance here in DS9 was great. I love that Alexander. It just took us so damn long to get there, and it was no thanks really to Worf for getting us there. But it worked out. We got there, But what I really love is I love the way that Dax handles Worf. And the way that he learns to forgive himself about Yoshi and realize, accept this little bond that he had. So this is a change in Worf, and maybe he is seeing oh, I made the mistake earlier. I didn't do everything that I could. Now things are different. The relationship is different. I'm at a different place in my life. This could be this really interesting turning point for Worf. And it's parallel to the story of the O'Briens, who, look, I will give them credit for this because I just went off about how bad the writing is for Keiko and Miles pretty much any time they're together. What I was happy about, what I was happy about is that at least in this episode, they have their concerns, but they work together to try to solve the problem. There isn't blaming or anger. There aren't those kind of cliches. Cliches for a reason, because there is some reality to it, but there is a shared concern. There's a shared sadness. There's always that lingering what if, they're playing that out in one way while Worf is playing it out in another way. So these two stories as A and B parallel each other very nicely, different stakes, different places in their lives. But that is where I found this episode to be very engaging and very thoughtful.
My question about Chester raises the terrifying possibility that Worf told Yoshi that he's a nice baby and a pretty baby.
All All right, we just barely made it, Norman. You went through the portal, you came back feral, I sent you right back through, and look, we got you aged just a few seconds from our last segment. So I'm glad that timing worked out, and you're here just in time to share with me and our audience what you thought of the episode, how you felt about the morals, meanings, messages, where the whole thing stands up. So I'm going to kick it to you first. Does the episode hold up?
Well, first of all, I want to let all of our listeners know that my hair looks amazing right after coming through the portal. None of this feral hair stuff. My hair
that was why I sent you back through. That was why I sent you back through, because I couldn't take it if it was going to be feral-haired Norman. That is not a good look on you.
Oh, that's our album name for this episode, Feral-Haired Norman.
Feral-Haired Norman. That's it.
Right.
Yes. All right. So everybody got to work on that. I want to see album art.
Okay, so take a deep breath, everyone.
Okay.
Does this episode hold up? Quite honestly, for the most part, for me, yes.
Okay, you have an explanation there.
A rather long one, if you can bear with me.
Okay, I can't wait.
Okay, so as to use my own past critiques as sort of, say, like a barometer or a guidepost to defend this episode, as opposed to, say, my previous issues and critiques with prior episode, this one, for me, actually does work both on paper and almost in execution from, in comparison to, say, Valiant or The Reckoning or Prophet and Lace, episodes that I've said in recent past mission logs that these were episodes that solely worked, say, in the pitch phase or the brainstorming phase and only really worked well on paper. They fell short in the execution, and they were great as an idea. But Time's Orphan, for me, was so close to being a very emotionally impactful episode, but one element was really missing for me, and something that I've always praised Deep Space Nine for in episodes, even if they didn't work, and that is the strength of the acting performances that would normally save a lackluster episode from just being completely unwatchable because it was a bad idea. The acting always saved it. Now, to be honest, I found myself wanting a bit when I watched this episode for the first time, and I think it's because I really wanted to see more emotional turmoil from our lead characters, especially from Colm and Rosalind. I think they should have given us far stronger performances in this episode, especially when they were saying goodbye to Molly, feral Molly. I wanted to see their hearts fully laid bare at that moment because I wanted my heart to be torn from my chest and be right there with them with tears on my knees, feeling that loss, that sacrifice. And we know, based on the quality of previous performances, that they are both capable of far more better emotional, contextual performances than we have seen in this episode. And especially with Colm, as we saw in that episode where he was contemplating suicide. That episode, his performance, Colm's performance in that episode was breathtaking. So this is where the episode loses me. I understand why they went at the lengths that they did to save Molly, but I never bought into the emotional struggle of why they wanted to do it. And that's where this huge disconnect is for me in this episode. But in the end, overall, I would recommend this episode because I believe the intent of it holds up for the human elements that are at the center of Time's Orphan, and they only really gain momentum over time as your experience changes, as your perspective changes. I don't know how I would have reacted to this episode in 1998. But I probably would have picked apart the easy low-hanging fruit to be able to snipe at. Time travel, the problems that this episode is rife with when it comes to time travel. But the thing is that that's not, for me, that's not what Star Trek is about. Star Trek is about trying to find those emotional beats that you could connect with, to find character growth, to find how those experiences inform you as a person. And for me, that is where this episode succeeds, even if you have to work a little bit harder to see it. But It's the big question. The big question, what if you get a second chance? The even bigger question is, what if you get a third chance? And what do you do with that? But I will get into those thoughts a little bit later on in Morals and Meanings and Messages. I hand my soapbox back to you, John.
Okay. Well, see, that's very interesting because I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you in principle that the strengths of this episode are about that emotional human core. But I think perceptually, you and I our experience is something different with this episode. Those moments worked for you. Those moments didn't work for me because I feel so detached from the Miles and Keiko relationship. Mm-hmm. So all that stuff that you just mentioned is exactly what I want out of this episode, but I feel like they're preventing me from getting that out of this episode. But let me talk about the things that I like first. Look, Worf is a terrible father no matter how you slice it. But
how dare you?
But he and Dax had the best moments out of this episode. Hands down. They're both wonderful in this. And the little moments that they had in what is really, if you add it up, not a lot of screen time, because most of the majority is for the A plot here. They get across a lot in those few moments that they do have. I like, you talked about sort of your detachment from the sci-fi timey-wimey stuff in this, but I like the fact that we're doing an episode that almost could be a throwback to just some purely weird sci-fi concept that you could have done on TOS or TNG. Mm-hmm. The problem is that at least, in the last half of season 6 of DS9, it has just been a wildly inconsistent mess for a series that takes its arc very seriously and its character development very seriously. We've had this run of episodes that just feels like they were dredging up the abandoned episodes that nobody had a really good grasp of in the first place. And it's jarring to be so completely removed from the overall arcs that we've had. And look, it's not the worst idea to break it up some, do something a little bit different. But these last several episodes have just been all over the map. I think the greatest sin of this episode is squandering the very few minutes that we have with the O'Brien family. We were introduced to Keiko in TNG. And this has been a relationship years in the making, and yet you add it up, and it really is just minutes. And it's shocking that they couldn't figure out something better to do with the dynamic between her and Miles. It feels like the plot here feels like a manufactured drama rather than something that we're invested in. That goes back to what I was saying to you, Norm, about my lack of emotional involvement here. And yes, look, I get it. All of the drama of Star Trek is manufactured drama. But this is different. At least it struck me different.
We have to earn it. Even if it's manufactured, you have to earn it.
You do. You emotionally have to earn it. You have to be there with those characters. And here was the other thing that felt very strange. And I wonder, I'm so glad that you brought this up right at the top, the what ifs here. What if they had made it about Kirayoshi? What if it was Molly but raised by people of some sort rather than totally feral? There are a lot of roads they could have gone down. But they went with this, with her being feral and non-communicative. And I talked about how in Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night, one of the big problems for me was that I felt it was needlessly cruel to Kira, forcing her to go through all of this stuff, to live those moments. And I felt like this episode bordered on the same thing. It was cruel to Molly, which in turn felt cruel to Miles and Keiko. And I have a real issue with that. Now, the most interesting thing is the reconnection of the family, the emotional bonds of the family. But the way this plot goes, she is psychologically under duress. She gets shot with a phaser. She gets thrown in the brig. She's sedated, being dragged through the halls of DS9. And all of that just, particularly rewatch after rewatch, made me feel very uncomfortable for what we were going through with her, when really the heart, the core of this story is about this family bond. What does a family do for each other? Mm-hmm. But I feel like that gets lost in the plot mechanics of this story. So at the end of the day, I can't recommend it. I feel like it's not a totally irredeemable episode because I think where it hits its best notes, particularly with Dax and Worf, they're great moments. But I feel like this is not one that I want to watch again, at least not anytime soon. So, but let's talk about morals, meanings, messages here, because I'm not seeing this as a strong moral meaning message episode. I'm seeing it as something else. But you tell me what you got from this.
Well, before we jump into that, I wanted to ask you, because we have seen a certain trend since In the Pale Moonlight, why do you think that is? Do you think the In the Pale Moonlight was so well written, even if we disagree with In the Pale Moonlight,
yeah,
it was so well done. It was so strong. The
performance, it's a dramatic high point for the series, and anybody who sent us nasty messages about it, you have to understand, we both really like the episode. We question where it lands with its statement, but there you go. Yeah.
But that was such a high, but that was the top of the bell curve.
Yeah.
That, are we judging episodes against the quality of that particular episode fairly or unfairly?
You know what? Okay, that's a legitimate question. If you had taken this same plot and you had parked it back in, an earlier season of DS9 where we weren't so invested in the Dominion War, we weren't so invested in all the politics of that world, it might have played better, but I still think once you introduce this idea of the feral child who is punished throughout the episode, I still think I would have a problem with it. The issue with In the Pale Moonlight so far, it's just that we did have this high watermark for the drama of the series, but now we haven't really dealt with any sort of consequence.
Exactly. Yes.
So even in an episode, even if you're going to take a departure, which is fine, they can't all just be the same story over and over again. Even if you're going to take a departure, I still need to understand that there is some lingering acknowledgement of what we've just been through.
I mean, aside from a throwaway line where, Chief's like, if the war heats up again, I'm going to put in for a transfer. That's not serialization.
No, that is not good enough at all. And look, we made light of it in segment 2 of this podcast, the idea that, well, the chief basically could get away with anything because now he's got a captain who bald-faced lied and covered his tracks. So where is the principle left anymore? That's gone out the airlock.
Right.
But that's the kind of thing where you almost want that moment with Sisko. It's sort of the epilogue to this, where Sisko's got to acknowledge, like, I really can't do anything with you because it's complicated, and it goes away. Yeah. So I think, there are plenty of other ways to approach doing this episode. I don't think the concept is bad at all. I think it's a very interesting concept. I think it's a kind of high-minded sci-fi what if, and that's cool. It is very much a throwback to an earlier type of Star Trek storytelling. But what they chose to do with it and who they chose to do it with, I think weakens any sort of better outcome they could have here.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah, I think that within seasons 1, 2, or 3, where this high serialization, quote unquote, high serialization of this series is supposed to be taking place, it is very, it's very askew of that particular direction. But that's for a completely separate discussion. Morals, meanings, and messages. Okay, so there's an old saying: you can't understand because you're not a parent. Now, how many times have we heard that before when it comes to certain comments we've made, or when we're looking at parents and children arguing in public, struggling with their children, things of that nature? But I'm looking at it deeper than that in this episode. I'm looking at it at the sacrifices of parents and what they wouldn't do or risk for their children. So that's where this episode lands with me. So bear with me, because this is one of Norm's grand soliloquies, because I feel very strongly about this.
Can't wait.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you can't understand because you aren't a parent. To that I say, what a load of crap. But
Yeah, I got to slide you the soapbox back.
Right.
So, yeah, there you go.
But that was me when this episode was released in 1998. When I was 26 years old, I was more like Quark than, say, Cisco or Miles, especially in this episode, or maybe even Worf. I wasn't a parent. I was 26 years old. I only cared for myself, right? I only cared for my sphere of influence, that which helped shape my life. I was only caring about what I could get out of whatever I could eke out from my meager existence at the time. I cared for me and me alone, because that was the fact. And I think that that's what a lot of people at that age also are about. I, period, was, period, alone, period. And it's easier to be selfish when you're alone, because all you have to do is focus on yourself, your needs, your comfort, your desires, your life. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're not the only life that walks this planet. And in the course of time, which is the great teacher with the experience that you have over the course of the ups and downs that you have with life, you start seeing and observing the struggle of humanity as a whole. And especially those moments where you see and reflect on those parents having those struggles with children that used to incite you before to where I said that was crap, not understanding being a parent. Being able to observe this dynamic from afar. My sister has children. My best friends have children. They're going through teenage drama. They're going through trying to afford putting them through college. They're trying to feed their families. Those are great sacrifices that I've accepted in their lives as raising children. And I see that parents, they sacrifice so much in so many different ways because of that truth of the axiom, so that they can have a better life than they had. Right? So what does that mean to someone like me watching this episode, still without children, still only need to sacrifice very little in my life because all I have to do is worry about me, maybe Carol, maybe my rabbits and cats. I have no children. I only have to make it to tomorrow. I only have to be responsible for a very little in my life. But that's where I now understand how supernaturally superhuman it is to be a parent, because they place their own wants and desires so far behind the wants and desires of their own children, because they want to extend that happiness that they had in their lives into their children's lives. I'm not saying that this happens for every single relationship between parents and children. I'm trying to generalize this and seeing this in the context of the O'Briens. By and large, children are the truest extension of their parents. They're these links in the chains of immortality, not just for themselves, but for the human race. And this is why I now understand why parents choose to make sacrifices that they do to ensure the happiness and the safety of their children. This is what Miles and Keiko chose to do, to return Molly and to sacrifice having her in their physical life so that she would be happy elsewhere. It's because it's a direct reflection of their own moral compass. It's a reflection of who they are, a reflection of their responsibility and their obligation, so that their children will never be wanting in life. They will never be wanting for happiness, for food, for comfort, for shelter, for love. That's what they're doing at the end of this episode. Now, as clumsily as this episode was created, this was the true intent that I saw. So in that saying where you don't understand, you don't have children, that it's more in the context of how it's being said, than an excuse of why it's being said. It's a reality and a statement that parents need to wield, because there's no way in that moment that they can explain the complexity of any given situation or struggle at that time between a parent and a child to an outside observer. And understanding that, trying to come to terms with that, is why I think that there is something salvageable about this episode if we were just given a little bit more than they offered us.
I think that's where I am, which is that I'm looking for that thing that is salvageable. And it's just on the other side of being salvageable. I told you before we did this that I didn't really find a moral meaning or message here, but I do think that this story does a decent job of what you just very eloquently put. It is a rumination about parenthood and maturity and this emotional bond that parents have with their children. There's the very obvious step that the O'Briens go through here, that they would do anything for their daughter to try to maintain and recreate that bond once it's gone. I think that's understandable, that's admirable. And there's something beautiful about that when it's played well. And again, we've argued here that this story is not particularly played well. But I think the other important part of this story that is very well reflected in both is this theme of this rumination on forgiveness for the mistakes that are made, for not knowing all the answers all the time, and even the best intentions of what parents can do for their children sometimes don't have the intended or best results. But that's simply an unknown, and parents can only do what it is that they feel in the moment is the right thing to do. Now, fortunately, I don't know any parents who have been faced with a time travel dilemma with their son or daughter who has gone through a portal and emerged 10 years later as a, feral animal-like child. That's okay. That's not something that they have to deal with. But it is nice to see, whether it's on the larger scale with Miles and Keiko or on a smaller scale with Worf and Dax, this idea of commitment and forgiveness within these families, and that's what allows them to go forward.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. If you would like to support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog. And for more Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, the sound of her voice.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers Adam Brusky, Homer Frizzell, Mike Richards, and Mike Schabel. I know how to find out who looked after Chester. Wait to see if he starts saying gong gong gong. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.